Hi there, everyone. My name is Jamie Williams, and today we're going to have a discussion with various people, experts in their field, around how we get ready to go back to work as the lockdown restrictions ease into the next few weeks. So, who I've got with me today is I've got Brian Garland.
Hi, I'm Brian Garland. I'm a general service partner with Gerald Thomas, covering a wide range of clients, tongue-tied there.
We've got Nigel Hill.
Hello, I'm Managing Director of a company called Umbra. We normally manufacture window blinds and shading products. Currently, we're manufacturing screening products to help with social distancing in the workplace.
We've got Hannah Belton.
Hi, my name is Hannah Belton. I'm a Director and Head of Employment at Roche Solicitors. We advise employer clients on the whole range of employment and HR issues.
And we've got ian.tovey.
Hi there, my name is ian.tovey. I'm a commercial finance broker. We're running my own business called Action Commercial Finance, which I set up after a long career with NatWest.
Okay, thanks for the introductions, and we'll get into the basis of what we're discussing here today. We're going to have a look at what businesses can do to get ready for going back to work after the lockdown restrictions ease. So, Hannah, if we come to you first, just can you give me a brief overview of what the current situation is?
I'll try and be as brief as possible. In relation to the lockdown position, as most of you will know, obviously, we've had an announcement today from the Chancellor regarding the job retention scheme. It has been announced that that will be extended until October. The likelihood is between August and October there'll be some sort of permissible part-time working that will take place. So I think we'll see an increase in workers coming back during that period. The position in Wales, though, is slightly different to that in England. Since the 23rd of March, the Welsh Government has announced a series of businesses that are not permitted to be open. Of course, most of them that we'll have heard of are restaurants, hospitality businesses, unless they're takeaways, but also businesses such as leisure centres, gyms, and other shops that frequently we would go to. So it's going to be a big ask to get everyone back into work very quickly and for things to come back to normal. What the Welsh Government have announced are social distancing guidelines, the requirement for people in charge of work to get their staff, their customers, their visitors to stay 2 metres apart during the working day and during the work that they provide. Now, the difficulty with that is obviously a lot of businesses aren't set up to work like that. In relation to the guidance is not just something that employers have to consider, but managers. So the responsibility is on those in charge of work. So if that happens to be a manager on site, they are responsible for ensuring their staff stay 2 metres apart. Now, the Welsh Government have legislated against this, which is not something that England have done. And they've set out some reasonable measures that need to be taken into consideration. Now, in considering whether or not staff can work 2 metres apart, I know Nigel is going to touch on this in more detail as well. But some things that employers may want to consider is the cost of ensuring people can stay 2 metres apart, the nature of the work, can measures be put in place without compromising health and safety, and the nature and capacity of those already in the workplace. So it'll be really vital when we do return to work that risk assessments are carried out. Not only that they're carried out, but they're recorded and they're shared with the workforce as well. So most of us will have seen the Prime Minister's speech on the 10th of May, but much of what was said in that speech currently doesn't apply to Wales. What is interesting, though, is the guidance that was put into place yesterday on the 11th of May. That was actually written in conjunction with Welsh Government and the other governments throughout the UK. So what we're thinking is that when Wales do relax the restrictions on working, the likelihood is it will be that working safely document that was released yesterday that Wales will be looking at complying with. Now, some of the factors from that guidance include things such as practical things such as relaxing the rules on turnstiles and touch-based security devices such as keypads to enter buildings, restricting access between different sites and avoiding the use of hot desks. One of the questions that we're frequently being asked as employment solicitors is what happens with those with childcare responsibilities? There's lots of and ahhing about when schools are going to reopen. Obviously, England had taken a different stance again to Wales, but there is no commitment to open schools on the 1st of June in Wales. The likelihood is, therefore, if staff are coming back into work, they may not have childcare responsibilities. So at the moment, those staff can be placed on furlough leave. And obviously, the job retention scheme has now been extended until the end of October. But one thing we are seeing is if workers are permitted to stay at home, do no work and get 80% of the pay, there'll be some workers who don't want to come back to work when the rules are relaxed. And there'll be some good reasons for that. There'll be health and safety concerns, there'll be people with medical needs or sharing a house with those with medical needs or who may be shielding, who actually there is a higher risk in them returning to work. But there'll also be some employees who would like to have a longer extended summer holiday and be paid 80% of pay for that. So what we need to think about in that situation is taking it on a case-by-case basis, discussing with each individual concerned what their reasons are for not wanting to return to work. If they're to do with medical reasons or health and safety, obviously you'll need to take into account legal and medical advice at the time. But if it's not valid reasons as to why someone wants to return to work, what you do have to be careful of is whistleblowing legislation and also the right not to be dismissed for raising health and safety concerns in the workplace. So we do recommend, if you are thinking of disciplining any staff who don't want to return to work, that you take advice before doing so.
Okay, thank you for that. And now there's been lots of talk about tracing app that may be coming out. So what are the implications for employers of introducing the tracing app into their workforce?
So at the moment, this is something that's being trialled, and actually there's a lot more questions and answers at the moment, in particular around data protection, because any device that captures information about someone's medical information is sensitive personal data under the General Data Protection Regulations. So some of the questions that employers may want to keep an eye on, although I can't say that I have the answers for this at the moment, but it's something that just keep an eye on for the future, is can employers insist on their workforce having the app in the first place? Can you demand that your staff download that app? And if you can demand that they download the app, what are you able to see as an employer or manager? Are you able to demand that your staff show you what's on that app to show that they haven't been in proximity with a third party who has tested positive for coronavirus to ensure they're not a risk in the workplace? And again, there'll be different rules as to whether or not the app is actually on a company mobile phone or someone's personal device. So although it does sound like a good thing, whether or not employers are going to be able to use it to ensure that their workforce do remain in a healthy condition and aren't spreading any of the virus throughout the rest of the workforce, will have to be wait to be seen, and we'll wait for more information from the Information Commissioner's office on this.
Thank you very much for that, Hannah. It was a very good brief overview of the legal position. And now I think with the legal position sort of talked about, is actually if we have a look at what the practical implications are of getting workplaces back to work. So Nigel, if I can ask you a couple of questions. The Welsh Government have made it a legal obligation now on employers to take all responsible measures to maintain physical distancing in the workplace, which Hannah's mentioned. But what does this actually look like in practice? And is there any checklists or detailed guidance that you can show us towards?
Yeah, well, as Hannah's touched on, the Welsh Assembly are the only administration who've actually legislated on this. The other UK administrations have left it as guidance, but in practice, the steps that employers need to take are basically the same across the whole of the UK. The key words being all reasonable measures. It's not all possible measures, but no, there are no detailed definitions of what that means, and therefore we have to interpret it and apply it to our own circumstances, which of course puts business owners and employers and managers in an unenviable position, really, because, you know, on the one hand, as Hannah said, there will be staff who are genuinely concerned, even fearful about coming back to work, and we are going to have to be able to demonstrate to those staff that we have put measures in place to protect them. The Prime Minister said last night that if staff don't feel safe at work, then they should report that. And so, you know, we have to be able to demonstrate that the measures are there and that staff feel safe. But the other side of the same coin is you may have staff who think the whole thing's a little bit overhyped and don't take it seriously, and maybe even break the physical distancing measures that you've got in place. And so the other side to it is we have to have means of enforcing those measures. You know, and I think in summary, one thing at least is very clear, which is that we cannot be going back to the work environment that we left 7 weeks ago. Back to work does not mean back to normal. It has to look and feel different than it did.
Absolutely. And would you be able to give us any suggestions or examples of how businesses can go about this in practice and get ready for the new normal?
Yeah, sure. Obviously with the caveat that I don't think anybody can give definitive guidance at the moment. And I'm only focusing on the distancing aspect. There are obviously other aspects to address, like cleaning and hygiene, touch points, PPE. But just in relation to distancing, first of all, you've got to review workspaces, workstations. Can you alter the layout to ensure that people are 2 meters apart? If achieving 2 meters distancing is not reasonably practical, then consider using screens to create physical barriers. Also have people facing away from each other where possible. Where you have tasks that currently involve more than one person, review how those tasks are done. Can they be broken down into smaller separate tasks that could be worked on by individuals? Or can you create small fixed teams so that you limit the number of persons that are coming into contact? You've obviously got to pay particular attention to areas where people tend to congregate, such as the printer, the coffee machine, the canteen, the smoking shelter, and of course high traffic areas like entrances and corridors and stairwells, lifts. And for these areas, you need to consider implementing signage and floor markings to create zones, implement one-way systems, maybe use different or additional doors to exit and enter buildings, and consider a second shift to reduce the number of persons on the premises at any one time. Consider staggering, introducing staggered start and finish times and break times. So these are all practical things to do to reduce the opportunity for persons to come in contact with one another. And of course, finally, if you have visitors to your site or if you serve the public, you're going to need measures in place to protect them and to protect your staff who interact with them. And again, this is where zoning and screening may be required. So I think, again, to summarize there, the phrase the new normal is perhaps getting a little overused, but it does convey the fact that there has to be changes that are evident and visible when persons come back to work. We have to be able to not only instruct them, and I would suggest that staff coming back to work should have an induction to explain the new procedures, but we have to do more than just instruct them. We have to be able to put physical things in place so that we are able to enforce the social distancing measures.
All right, thank you very much, Nigel. And now that we've sort of covered the practical aspects and the legal aspects of getting employees back to work, one of the big issues that businesses are going to face is on the financial side. So, Brian, I know we discussed this earlier, and as we move forward into the next few months, what are the financial issues that you foresee businesses facing?
Well, I think one of the main things that businesses will have to look towards is the whole business of cash flow. I think the underlying route once the virus started was very much seeing businesses husbanding their cash, making sure they had as much money in the bank, they got their grants, they had their loans that they took out. But of course, when they start back to work, they can quite easily see those reserves, those monies that they put together, dwindle quite quickly. You're paying employees, you're buying materials, and maybe you're buying on terms that were not quite as generous because everybody's tight on cash. So your suppliers will be looking at you and suggesting maybe that they're paid a bit quicker. So I think it's very much a case of, for every business really, to be looking at their short-term cash flow as being a critical thing that they decide. And if you split that into two areas, it's very easy to work out where the money goes. So you can work out, well, how much are you going to spend per week on wages, electricity, you name it. There's a very simple list that you can put together. It's going to be much more difficult to work out where is the money coming in and when is it coming in. So I think part of that is very much about opening up dialogue with your customers so you can be clear in terms of when you're going to be paid, the amount you're going to be paid. And of course, if you are in a fortunate position that you have got reasonably large reserves of cash, as some companies do have, then that's also an opportunity for those customers to look at negotiating better terms potentially with their suppliers, with their customers. So those are the main things that I think are going to be quite critical. And I think all businesses should be looking at having some form of 4-weekly cash flow to start, followed up with something like a 3 or a 4 month cash flow, so they can see how things are going to develop in the short term on a week by week basis.
Yeah, okay, and I think we hear a lot about preparing cash flow forecasts, and they're all well and good, but sometimes they're not practical. In preparing forecasts and actually using them moving forward, what are your ideas on how you can practically put them into use?
I think the whole thing about cash flow forecast is that it is straightforward in its essence. It's money in and money out. And that's what the models, the spreadsheets, the back of a cigarette packet kind of calculations, whichever your degree of complexity, that is what you need to kind of make sure you keep to the forefront of your mind. Money in, money out. And it's very much a case of, as I said before, you can identify fairly easily what money you are going to spend. You know how many people you're going to bring back to work, what their wages are, what support, if any, you'll be having for the balance. You know what you're going to be spending on your materials, on your supplies. It's then about working out the cash and when that's going to come in. It's also an opportunity for people to look at reinventing things. So have they made the most of their practical kind of situation? Have they looked at their R&D claims? Have they looked at their tax position on things like capital allowances? So if they've missed any claims, or maybe they've not done them as quickly as they could, they can accelerate the speed with which they do those, so they get more cash put into the business. You know, it's very much about maximizing the money in and controlling the money out.
All right, thank you for that, Brian. And you talked about some of the internal sources of finance there, which is, you know, doing your R&D claims, making sure you've got all your capital allowances in, and maybe looking at your year ends to shorten or lengthen. But there are going to be businesses that are certainly going to be looking at getting external sources of finance. And Ian, this is where you come in. Can you give us a brief overview at the moment of the funding market, the types of finance available at present, and thoughts on lenders' appetite to businesses as we climb out to the current situation?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jamie. At this moment in time, I suppose, not unsurprisingly, the market's dominated with the recently announced government-backed funding packages, the CBILS loan, and the more recently announced the bounce back loan, which provides loans up to 50,000. I'm sure everyone knows, 100% backed by the government. And there's been a huge uptake and quick turnaround of getting loans and monies out into businesses. I suppose a general bit of advice, if any business which has been adversely affected by the pandemic, and I doubt that there's very few that haven't, then I'd encourage any of those businesses who haven't yet explored those packages to do so. All the high street banks are accredited, and more alternate lenders, who many wouldn't perhaps have heard of, are coming on board, albeit in the main, it's only available to existing clients. So your first protocol will be your existing banker, or indeed if you're currently banking with a few that aren't yet accredited. There are a couple of high street banks who will accept applications from new customers. I think many businesses are attracted to the speed of the bounce back scheme, which is the lowest scheme, because when the original coronavirus business interruption scheme was launched, it was heavily subscribed, and banks were inundated with applications, and it was very slow getting the monies out. Now, a word of warning, if you do want to go for the business bounce back scheme to get the money quickly into your account, and I've seen applications being approved within hours and money's in the accounts the next day, carefully consider that if there is a likelihood that you'll need more in the future, at this moment in time, it isn't possible to uplift your business bounce bank loan into the larger scheme. You can only have one or the other. So that's just a bit of careful on that. It is being lobbied to see if you can do it at a future date, but that's it on that front. By the other side, conversely on that point, if you have had a coronavirus interruption scheme for less than 50,000, you can switch that over to a bounce back scheme. And on the face of it, it's a very attractive package because the rate is 2.5%. So your current loan may be lower than that. Turning to the general availability of funding and finance, I think a very important thing to note and to differentiate from the recession that we were in, driven by the credit crunch in 2008, is that there isn't a lack of liquidity within lenders, which was the problem last time, and that was restricting getting loans and finance out to businesses. So that isn't the case this time, and it's demonstrated by the amount of money that the government have been instructing banks to lend at this moment in time. There are a few restrictions and lenders pulling out of the market, but I think that's mainly driven from a logistical point of view, whereby they haven't got the valuers to go out and value the individual assets, if I am talking about property. I do sense that there will be a coming back into normal, we use the word normal, as best as possible when this clears up. Just to give a little bit of a flavour of the type of facilities that some businesses may not be used to or whatever, there's invoice discounting, which is a facility that's linked to your debtor book. So as your debtor book grows, the availability of cash grows with it. There's certain issues that you can have whereby if you've got a concentration of debtor books or if you've got a one large off contract, there are certain lenders who can accommodate that and specialise in that side of things. There's asset finance, which again, that is a very good product if you're looking to buy any sort of asset. It sits in your fixed assets of your balance sheet without using your cash resources, or indeed perhaps the business bank loan. It's a tax efficient way of sourcing finance. There's the business loan market, which is typically something that really came in as a result of the credit crunch back in 2008, where alternate lenders were providing unsecured finances, anything from £5,000 up to about £500,000, where no tangible security was required from the business, albeit a personal guarantee and sometimes a mortgage debenture can feature, cannot, depending on each thing where it is. Certain businesses, of course, I touched on the debtor book, won't have a debtor book if they're dealing in cash sales or dealing with the public. There's the merchant cash advance, whereby if a business does a lot of trading and sales via Streamline and the card facilities, they can get an advance against that, and the repayments are structured against future revenues. And then, of course, thinking one step ahead further, there is the short-term lending products and VAT loans. Of course, the government at this moment in time have given a deferral in paying the VAT up until the end of the next tax year, but that hasn't gone away. So when we get up to next April, there may be a need for it, and there is facilities available on that side of things. So I suppose in summary, it's going to be challenging times ahead, but the big bonus I get from it is that there is liquidity available within the marketplace with which to support the businesses. And there's many players out there. I, for example, I've got 160 lenders on my panel.
All right. And if a business was coming to you for help and advice, what tips and advice would you give to them in securing the finance? And what type of challenges would they face, and how should they approach them?
Well, Brian's touched on an awful lot on this, and I've got to say planning is key. I can only emphasize and endorse exactly what he said, to understand exactly how much cash is needed and present it in a certain manner on that. My experience tells me, having been through a few recessions previously, as I'm sure we all have, that the level of due diligence undertaken by lenders during recessionary times is enhanced. So surround yourself with good professionals, such as yourselves, to help you in pulling together the necessary financial information that banks are likely to look for. Up-to-date financial information is key, and indeed forecasts, if available, or at least a short-term cash flow forecast, as Brian's been alluding to there. We've talked about the change in terms of trade. Another thing to consider is that possibly, you know, aside from the obvious of shortening accredited terms, you may be approached by key customers to increase the debtor terms for you available. So again, it all comes into the planning and understanding your cash needs. Right, dealing with lenders. The bank's relationship offering has changed significantly over the last few years. Many businesses don't have regular contact with the bank relationship manager, or may even have been outsourced to call centres if they're of a smaller size or a smaller lending thing. They don't have the relationship manager, or indeed know who to speak to. I suppose perhaps where I would come into play there, I got many years of experience. I'm totally independent. So whereas previously, if you're talking just to one bank, you're dealing with their policies and their products. I could help pull together a structured proposal in a professional way, working with accountants like yourselves as well, and then present it in a manner that I know the banks would like and understand, having sat in their shoes for many, many years. So I suppose in summary, there is lending available, but you will need to be presenting it clearly and professionally to lenders to get the best chance of outcome for success.
All right, that's great. Thank you for that, Ian. And yeah, just to summarise, we've talked about how we get employees back to work from a legal perspective, from a practical perspective about their workplace, and we've also looked at the finance issues that businesses will face and how they can raise some external finance. So I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's taken part in the discussion today. There's certainly been some insightful comments that I've learned, and we can all take back to our businesses and implement in the coming weeks. So you know, the business and legal environment is changing quite rapidly. I'm sure there's going to be further announcements as we move forward. So if anyone does need to get in touch with you guys, if you can just share your contact details. Hannah, if you can go first.
Yep, you can email me at hbelton, that's hbelton, @morganlaroche.com, or you can ring me on 01267 493 130. Our website has got all of our contact details on as well.
Nigel?
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. My email address is nigel@Umbra Shading, that's UMBRASHADING.co.uk. And you can ring me on my mobile, 07848 453 028.
Brian?
My email is Brian, spelt with an I, .Garland @geraldthomas.co.uk, and my mobile is 07836 600 929.
And Ian?
Yeah, email address ian.tovey, TOVEY, @actioncf.com, or alternatively, my mobile is 07989 307 884.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. What we'll also do is include the contact details in the bio of this video on our YouTube channel, and also included on any email shots that go out to individuals. So once again, thank you everyone for taking part today. Really been great, and possibly do another one following up in a week or so's time. Thank you very much.